Inside a chilled container, crossing the Atlantic at 30 knots, lies a vegetable few people ever think about beyond the supermarket shelf. But the zucchini, in its simplicity, holds a complex logistical puzzle. Its cylindrical shape, so natural in the field, becomes a thermodynamic anomaly in transit. Beneath that smooth green skin, heat retention varies across its axis, creating internal gradients that traditional refrigeration systems were never designed to neutralize. What seems like a basic cooling task is, in fact, an invisible fight against geometry. Every container carries hundreds of crates. Each crate holds rows of zucchini, all aligned, all pre-cooled, all expected to arrive fresh. But thermal asymmetry means that the core of each fruit cools at a different rate than its surface. Heat doesn't just escape, it migrates, trapped, along the longitudinal axis like residual energy locked inside a sealed pipe. And this micro-differential, measured in fractions of degrees, is enough to shift the entire shelf life curve of a shipment. It's a silent drift that no inspector sees, until the decay begins. To understand this invisible threat, imagine a row crop planter in the field. It adjusts downforce in real time to account for varying soil compaction across a single row. The principle is simple. What lies beneath the surface isn't uniform, so neither should the pressure be. In cold chain logistics, the same logic applies. The biophysical behavior of a zucchini isn't uniform either. Every fruit absorbs and loses energy differently, especially under pressure, under stacking, under time. Yet most cold chain systems treat them as fixed blocks of cubic volume, ignoring the dynamic variables that precision agriculture already takes into account. The logistics world knows this kind of challenge well, outside of agriculture. In mining, conveyor belts are calibrated per load profile. The tilt, the torque, the motor output, all adjusted to compensate for irregular shapes and energy dissipation rates of rock and ore. And yet, in the world of zucchini transport, the same sophistication hasn't arrived. Shipments are still loaded, cooled, and dispatched based on average volume, not actual thermal load behavior. The question becomes unavoidable. If the mining industry adapts its conveyors to rocks, why are we still shipping vegetables as if they were uniform bricks? This oversight isn't just technical, it's structural. After 48 hours post-harvest, the internal vapor pressure of a zucchini begins to shift. The fruit starts to lose mass, not in visible spoilage, but in micro changes at the molecular level. Yet almost no exporter maps this pressure curve by zone within the container. No differentiation between pallets placed near the walls, under vents, or stacked in the thermal core. The result? Inconsistencies that trigger complaints, returns, and lost market confidence. Not because of poor harvesting, but because of invisible decisions made after the farm gate. This is not just about refrigeration. It's about recognizing vegetables as thermodynamic entities, as dynamic systems whose transport must obey the same principles of physics, of airflow, of load geometry that industries like aerospace and mining already embrace. Zucchini may not look like a complex cargo, but to move it across borders without decay, without waste, without financial loss, requires more than refrigeration. It requires engineering. And this is just the beginning. Because if one vegetable, in one container, can challenge the cold chain like this, what does that say about the rest of what we eat? The journey of a zucchini doesn't begin with harvest. It begins with contact. From the moment it's picked, it's placed into crates, boxes, or bins, each of them designed more for stacking efficiency than biological preservation. Beneath the surface of those crates, pressure points begin to form. The contact between fruit and surface becomes a site of stress, where tiny abrasions begin to compromise the cuticle. These aren't visible wounds. They are microfractures, barely measurable, but enough to allow moisture loss, fungal intrusion, and an accelerated decay curve that silently unfolds over days of transit. Much of this damage comes from the crate itself. High friction plastics, rough wood textures, and hard polymer edges all contribute to what logistics calls non-impact degradation. Zucchinis don't have to fall to be damaged. They only need to. In response, some exporters have begun to integrate elastomer-coated liners, materials engineered with micro-textured surfaces that adapt under pressure and reduce the formation of cuticular abrasions. With these liners, abrasion-related moisture loss drops by 17%. The visual quality of the fruit remains stable for longer, and its marketability extends into days that otherwise would trigger. But friction isn't uniform inside. Zucchinis located along the pallet edges face a different air turbulence. Every time the container's door is opened, every shift in temperature, every pulse of refrigeration fans creates microcurrents. These currents, especially near the external walls, pull moisture from exposed surfaces. Over a typical 12-day transit, zucchinis near the edge lose 1.6 times more mass than those positioned in the core. This uneven decay isn't monitored by most exporters. Few map spoilage curves per spatial position. Even fewer design their pallet systems to compete. One agricultural cooperative in southern Spain decided to investigate by embedding friction sensors into their pallet surfaces. They measured microstress in real time during load, transit, and the data helped them redesign their crate structure, introduce elastomer interfaces, and alter how crates were stacked based on fruit geometry and airflow dynamics. Result: a 21% reduction in visible spoilage complaints from key markets in the Middle East within just 2 years. No new chemicals, no new containers, just intelligent surface engineering applied. The question that lingers isn't just how to reduce this damage, it's how to measure it. The produce industry still relies on visual inspections and generic temperature logs, but what if zucchini could be tracked like tire? In the automotive world, tire wear is mapped per kilometer, per degree camber, per type. Couldn't the same logic apply to fruit? If abrasion losses were measured per kilometer, traveled, per container jolt, per microstress, then logistics wouldn't just react damage, it would anticipate it. This is not a hypothetical scenario. It is the next frontier in vegetable logistics. Because in the silent friction between a zucchini and its crate lies a chain reaction that determines freshness, profitability, and trust. And that reaction can be changed, not with more cooling, but with smarter contact, with materials that protect, with placements that consider airflow, and with a mentality that treats every zucchini not as cargo, but as a surface-sensitive set. Inside the control panels of refrigerated trucks and containers, decisions are made every hour, most of them by hands. Temperature knobs, vent settings, fan cycles, simple adjustments, often guided by intuition or routine. But in the context of fresh vegetable logistics, especially with zucchini, this human element can become a silent source of ability. Not because the people lack knowledge, but because the biological logic of the cargo doesn't always match the operational logic. One of the most persistent mismatches arises from how technicians set ventilation modes. The decision is often based on external temperature, a habit rooted in climate systems. But zucchini doesn't respond to external heat. It responds to internal humidity gradients, specifically to its own transit rate. As the breathes, it releases moisture. If that moisture isn't extracted at the right pace, it condenses inside the crate, accelerates microbial activity, and triggers early degradation. The average consequence of this mismatch is a thermal drift of 2.3 degrees Celsius, which may seem minor on a screen, but on a biochemical level, it's the difference between metabolic slowdown and microbation. This is where new systems begin to rewrite the script. Smart evaporator units equipped with adaptive logic can now switch between passive and active extraction modes based on the fruit's transpiration curves. These curves are dynamic. They change based on loading time, harvest freshness, and density. Unlike static settings, these systems read fluctuations and respond in real time, maintaining equilibrium between cooling and dehydration. The result isn't air, stability, a controlled envelope of temperature and humidity that follows the physiology of the zucchini, not just. The difference between manual and intelligent systems becomes evident when data is compared under identical conditions. In a controlled analysis involving twin trucks, each with the same volume, the same harvest, and the same destination, only one variable was changed: the Venn logic. The manually operated truck showed a 26% variance in relative humidity. The AI-regulated unit maintained a consistent curve, protecting the cargo's texture, mass, and color integrity. The cost of both operations was similar. The out was not. Some exporters are already adopting this mindset. In Brazil, a large-scale pilot embedded humidity and transpiration sensors directly inside crates. Instead of relying solely on container-wide averages, they tracked the behavior of individual pallets. The findings led to simple protocol changes, modifying airflow timing, adjusting loading sequences, and achieved a 14% increase in shelf life by the time the zucchinis reached port. No new routes, no new trucks, just better synchronization between biological behavior and mechanical response. The shift in thinking requires a new metaphor. Zucchinis aren't passive cargo. They are dynamic water batteries, charging with moisture at harvest, discharging slowly in transit. If the discharge is too fast, the skin ruptures, cells collapse, the fruit fails. If it's too slow, condensation builds, spoilage accelerates. The mission isn't just to cool, it's to manage energy, to steward the transition between field and shelf with precision, rhythm, and respect for the biological tempo of each load. Logistics, in this sense, becomes a choreography, not just of trucks and ports, but of respiration and condensation, of airflow and silence. And it all begins with how we interpret the numbers on a control panel. Because behind every 2.3 degrees of drift, there is a decision. And behind every decision, a chance to align with the true nature of what we carry. In the field, precision is no longer optional. A modern seeder doesn't just drop seeds, it adapts every second to changing terrain. It recalibrates depth, adjusts downforce, shifts spacing based on micro-variations in the soil. It treats every square centimeter of land with surgical attention. Yet when those same vegetables are harvested and packed for transport, much of that intelligence is abandoned. Zucchinis, each with unique thermal behavior, cuticular resistance, and moisture content, are loaded as if they were uniform, passive units. The sophistication that governs sowing rarely crosses into the domain of freight, but this gap is starting to close. In Japan, containers are no longer just boxes. They are smart environments. Inspired by the ventilation patterns of leaves, some units now use leaf-mimic diffusion membranes to simulate natural airflow inside sealed cargo. These membranes don't simply cool, they regulate evaporation, direct moisture movement, and control oxygen diffusion. The result is not only extended shelf life, but more predictable physiological responses from the vegetables. For zucchinis, whose cuticles are sensitive to sudden humidity shifts, the difference is structural. It means arriving not just intact, but biologically stable. This is the future of vegetable logistics. Not colder temperatures, but more intelligent thermodynamics. Not more insulation, but adaptive biothermal zones. Spaces that shift airflow, humidity, and even light exposure, depending on the crop's profile, crate position, and post-harvest physiology. A container that treats a zucchini differently than a pepper, not because of price, but because of structure. One that understands that freshness is not a moment, it's a process, unfolding hour by hour, molecule by molecule, from the farm gate to the loading dock. The technology already exists. The data already proves it. The only barrier now is mental, because what this shift demands is not another upgrade, it's a redesign. A logistics system that starts not with volume or so, schedule, but with the biological language of the crop itself. A system that doesn't average its cargo into standard procedures, but listens to each fruit as an active participant in the journey. If modern harvesters can detect variations in plant height and soil density with millimetric precision, then containers should be capable of the same level of sensitivity. Precision shouldn't end at the edge of the field. It should ride in the crate, flow in the air currents, calculate in real time. Because behind every shipment of zucchini is an infrastructure that touches ports, pallets, and policies. And behind that, there is engineering, science, necessary. In the end, logistics isn't just about moving food. It's about understanding life in transport. And if we can bring to transport the same intelligence we bring to planting, the journey of a zucchini can be not just efficient, but exact. Not just preserved, but respect. Because the systems that feed the world are already complex. What they need now is coherence. And before you go, take a second to check the pinned comment. It's something we've set aside for those who always stay until the end. People who look closer, think deeper, and appreciate the details most never notice. You might find it surprisingly worth your time.